so growing up, I had a really close friend that unfortunately developed anorexia, and I saw all the changes, all the behavioral changes that accompanied the onset of anorexia. But at that time, I had no idea that anorexia was a disorder that was related to mental health, and that that was associated with the brain. But at the same time, in grade 6, we had to do a project about an organ of our choice, and I chose the brain. And that's when I found out so much about the brain, about mental health. And I remember like discussing these things that I was finding out about the brain with my mom, and she really encouraged me to pursue then this interest in neuroscience. One thing that I'm personally intrigued about, and I feel like it's also a question that's in the population too, is why is it that a specific factor will be stressful to one individual, but not to another individual? And that's the whole idea behind stress resilience, you know? So how do we develop that stress resilience, and why is it that there are certain stress factors that seem very stressful to us, that sometimes can even be chronic stress and could lead to the onset of mental illness in one individual, but then not in a different individual? So understanding these individual differences is really, really important to me. Understanding the sex difference is also quite important. So understanding why women will be more susceptible to some mental disorders and men will be more susceptible to others. The difference also in the symptomology between men and women is equally important to me. And also early onset of mental illness. Why is it that we do see mental illnesses appear quite early in the development? And often when they start so early, they tend to be treatment resistant as well. And so I really want to work on the prevention side of things and see whether it can be prevented to begin with, so that we don't have to worry about it being resistant to treatment. Just like other women, I faced the discrimination related to gender, but also discrimination related to being from a minority group. And so, you know, often like I felt that I was in a room with colleagues, with other students sharing an idea, and it's as though it wasn't heard, but then a male colleague would say the same idea, and now all of a sudden it was a fantastic idea. So I think as women, we tend to experience quite a bit of this sort of discrimination. But you know, what was interesting is that at that time when I was experiencing this type of discrimination, I didn't really perceive it as being discrimination. For me, it was always like, oh, I guess they didn't hear me. Or next time, maybe I should say it a bit louder. Or maybe my timing was wrong when I shared the idea. You know, so I wasn't quite seeing it as negative per se, but always I thought that maybe I should adjust something on my end. And it's only years after when I started hearing about struggles of other women in science and what they have experienced. And that's when I realized that, oh, it wasn't me, you know, per se, but it was probably a combination of both, you know, but there was that other side that I never realized. And I think part of that came from the fact that I was just so interested in neuroscience that I didn't want to see any of the negativity, and I was kind of unconsciously blocking it, and also all the encouragement from my parents. So the Women in Science group, you know, is a professional group, but it is also quite a group through which we tie and develop lots of relationships and friendships that really lasts an entire lifetime. And so for me, that was like a big, I guess a big factor that attracted me to the Women in Science group. It's very, very collegial. Women are there to support one another. We have had interactions with individual women outside of our working group that were seeking help, support, guidance, and we have been there through every step of the way. We've also put together several workshops that have helped women develop their leadership skills, and we're gonna organize another one. We are now working on a book that we are hoping that will help also women in science. And here we're not focusing solely on motherhood and childcare, but we're discussing all sorts of challenges that women face, such as discrimination, and sharing how we overcame these challenges, or how actually we think we might have successfully overcome this. And so we're hoping that this will be helpful to other women in science. They need to make sure that at each level, there are equal men and women that are represented, you know. So often we're going to see that there is a lot of women at the undergraduate level, at the graduate level, but then all of a sudden, when we look at faculty positions, there is a complete imbalance. So this needs to change. It needs to change because we need to bring equity at that level, but also the trainees, the women that are being trained, need the support of another woman to guide them, a role model that they can look up to, that they can go to talk when they have difficulties, when they have challenges. So it's really important that we bring women in this field. But in addition to that too, it shouldn't stop at the professor level. We need more women in dean's position, as vice presidents, presidents, etc. We need to allow women to progress through all these levels and to be represented equally and globally, not just in unique countries or unique institutions. And I think institutions can do a lot to ensure that this is really being followed through. There is so much that they can do to really bring gender equity at the forefront. First, they need to identify where the gaps are. At which level are we seeing that women are not being equally represented? And so if it's at the level of faculty positions, then they need to make it an objective for each unit, each department within the university to hire women or solely women for a certain number of years until the equity has been reached. And they can put in place some incentives, you know, and say, if you hire a woman in the position, in the faculty position that we've given you, we'll give you a second position then, you know. So there is an incentive, a motivation to hire women in various units. Then they also need to see if there are gaps at the level of, say, research chairs or university chairs. And if there is inequity, then they need to make these research chairs for a few years exclusive to women, so that only women are being applied and are applying and are being considered for these positions. If we keeping them open to both gender, then there is this unconscious bias of always going towards hiring men. And so I think that we need to really make sure that we're putting in place mechanisms that are going to allow us to bring this gender equity. And we have to do so willingly by just considering only women for these positions for a few years until the equity has been reached. In science, the currency is publication. So the more publications you're able to have, the more attractive you will be for universities. And then often there is this question of whether one publication in a really high impact journal is better than several publications in average ranking journals. And I remember having this conversation with my postdoc supervisor. And what I was recommended is that it's better to publish multiple papers in average to good journals than go for one publication in excellent journal when you are building your career, because you want to show sustained productivity and the ability to continue publishing regularly. Because if you go for the very high impact journals, then often it's like 5-6 years of work that go into one publication. And so during that time, you don't have any output to show. So it's you want to go for good journals, but you also want to show sustained productivity. And so if this is your passion, then be determined to follow it through and to not let various circumstances that you will encounter throughout your career discourage you. So continue to work hard, remain positive and determined, and do your best, and if you feel that, the situation that you're in, say the laboratory that you're in is not allowing you to grow fully as a researcher and develop your full potential, then it's okay to seek a different supervisor, So we shouldn't feel stuck. We shouldn't let these situations discourage us from pursuing a career in science. Sometimes it's just about figuring out what are these factors that are making it particularly difficult and just seeing how we can change these and overcome these challenges.